Hello and welcome to the Great Womb Awakening, where women across the globe are waking up to the undeniable truth that the female body is the most powerful shamanic tool on the planet. Every woman can utilize the energies of change and expansion present at this time to ground a new vision that can serve the next 7 generations and beyond. And women can harness this unprecedented power that lies deep within their female bodies and unleash that power to create a global change at a level that's never before been seen on this planet. I'm your host, Kathy Forrest, founder of Celestial Forest Institute, and we are here today with Dr. Gina Sager. Gina is a retired board-certified general surgeon. She was named one of Baltimore's top docs in October of 2000. And she permanently left the practice of traditional Western medicine in May 2002 to explore her longtime interest in holistic healing. She studied and practiced Buddhism in the Tibetan tradition. She studied ancient wisdom traditions, including traditional Chinese wisdom and 5-element theory at Thai Sophia Institute. She's also a 200-hour yoga teacher trained instructor in integrative yoga therapy. She holds a 60-hour certificate in Ayurveda and has completed 2 years of training in the Eden Energy Medicine School. Gina's been on a lifelong journey to find her open heart and to heal physical and emotional and spiritual wounds. She strives to teach from her awakening heart and from her own personal experiences rather than simply the things she's learned intellectually. However, her scientific background lends a new perspective to some of the more esoteric practices and enhances her explanations of modern and energetic medicine. In Ayurveda, it's said that the best physician is one who teaches patients to care for themselves. In this spirit, Gina believes that her heart's work is to share what she's learned on her own transformative journey, offering others sacred space and opportunity to reconnect with their own deepest nature, empowering them to care for themselves using a blending of ancient and modern ways to remember wholeness. And I have to chime in here and say that part of the reason I have Gina on this call today is because I heard her story and I wanted her to share it with all the women that are going to be watching the summit. Her topic today is Phoenix Rising, Trading Mastery for Mystery to Remember Wholeness. And this is one woman surgeon's healing journey. So Gina, welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you on the call today. And I just want to pull your string and turn you loose. Please tell us how you transitioned from surgery to energy and yoga nidra and all of that. How did that happen?
Wow. Well, first of all, I want to thank you from my heart for having me. And it's always sort of overwhelming and humbling to hear the list of things that have happened in my lifetime. So I thank you for that lovely introduction. So wow, that's a big question that you're starting with. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I guess how I want to start is to say that ever since I was a little kid, I knew I was going to be a doctor. You know, I started out wanting to be a neurosurgeon, and then I became an orthopedic surgeon at age 5 when my great grandmother broke her hip. You know, but I knew I was on a healing track. I think that, you know, because of the small town in which I grew up and the way in which I grew up, it really, you know, I had no way of knowing that there were other ways to heal except for surgery. And quite frankly, I really wanted out of this small town. And one of the ways to do that was to do something that would allow me to thrive, that would allow me to, you know, transcend the place where I was. So from the time when I was really little, I was single-minded. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to be a surgeon. And that was my life. That was my path for, you know, 20 years. So I, you know, was lucky enough to be accepted into medical school. I went to a surgery residency, and I remember in the surgery office, shortly after I began my internship, saying to one of the unit secretaries there, I realize now that if I want to do this, I'm going to have to choose between this and having a life. And I remember choosing surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have any regrets at all in my life, it might be that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't occur to me. I didn't believe that I could do this thing and anything else. Like
Right.
I was completely in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked hard, nobody ever discriminated against me. I don't have one of those stories. Or if they did, I didn't pay attention to it because nobody, frankly, could have been harder on me than I was on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wasn't oppressed. I wasn't abused.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very one-pointed, and it was crystal clear to me that if I wanted to survive, I needed to not talk about things that weren't acceptable or understandable by my male colleagues.
Right.
Again, so much of this is retrospective. I didn't really feel it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But here I am really thriving in a really male-dominated world,
Mm-hmm.
winning all kinds of accolades, having huge numbers of patients and really good outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was served papers in a lawsuit out of the blue sky,
Mm-hmm.
it completely pulled the rug out from under me.
Mm.
I've said for many years that if I would have actually done something wrong, it would have been easier for me to handle.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really a very odd, convoluted experience where I was actually visiting an old patient of mine. And she had a complication at someone else's hand in surgery. But because I was visiting her and she had a fatal complication, I was accused of not saving her from her other doctors. Now, I think that is really relevant here because it speaks to the worldview that I lived with. It speaks, I think, to the worldview that a lot of other women who are listening here might be living with, which is that I am solely responsible for the well-being of everyone around me.
Right.
And I don't think I would have known that had that not happened. It was devastating. It was a horrible experience. It broke me into pieces, and yet I didn't think I had a choice, and I continued my work. I have really not a lot of autobiographical memory about that time because all I did was get up, hold my breath, go do what I had to do, and come home and breathe out. And I did that for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And finally, one day when it just became a financial issue, because I happened to, curiously enough, like my patients. I like to spend time with my patients, which in a solo general surgery practice is not a very, financially feasible thing to do.
Right.
The numbers weren't adding up, and I was miserable. And I just decided one day, well, I'll tell you the mystical side of the story, since we're going from mastery to mystery. I took a day off, which was never had ever happened before. And I was sitting on my porch in the woods, and I heard a shuffling in the leaves beneath the deck. And it was an owl in the middle of the day. And I remember just bursting into tears. I didn't have any kind of interest in the spiritual or mystical really at that point. But that owl sitting in my backyard on that day when I was trying to decide what I was going to do was life-changing.
Right.
And the next day I went to work and I said to my colleagues, I'm going to tell you something. And before I speak, it's non-negotiable. Like, nobody's going to talk me out of this. I'm leaving. And 6 weeks later, my door was locked. My practice was sold. And I was on a train to go study mindfulness-based stress reduction with John Kabat-Zinn at Omega Institute. So I'm thinking, I'm a smart person. I took this splinter out. Now I'm fine. Oh my God. I had no idea what kind of shape I was in. So I get to this magnificent place, the first vacation I've had in maybe 20 years. I walk into this gorgeous landscape, people are nice and smiling, which was very anxiety provoking for me after having the surgery in my life. And I couldn't breathe. Kath. I couldn't take a breath. My body hurt, my neck hurt. And I'm like, oh my God, you know what? It's actually been like this for a long time. And I didn't even know.
Yep.
So I did my first training with John Kabat-Zinn in mindfulness. I didn't understand why I was going to be turning from surgery to meditation. I just knew I had to. And after that first training, I actually just took 2 years off. I took 2 years off just to learn to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still working on that
Mm-hmm.
20 years later. Just because I'm so entrained to be on alert.
Right.
And I've been since that time really just trying to figure out how to be,
Mm-hmm.
like how to be,
Mm-hmm.
because I haven't known that.
Right.
And so in the recovery phase, which again is ongoing,
Mm-hmm.
what I tried to do was to learn as much as I could about me, because I had missed the whole first 40 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know who you are. I don't know what you like or what you believe or anything.
Right.
And so this ongoing journey now is about me trying to understand me,
Mm-hmm.
me learning to respect, despite the fact that I want to be strong and unable to be harmed or intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
That I was really deeply harmed by that
Mm-hmm.
malpractice suit. And when I looked back at the rest of my life, there were many, many other things that had deeply wounded me that I just put aside. And so I've had to spend all of this time really just digging that stuff out.
Right.
And much to my sadness, horror, disappointment,
Mm-hmm.
I have not been able to really find people who were willing to talk about this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my intentions that I didn't understand for a long time was an intention when I started doing this work in mindfulness and then more, was that I needed in my bone marrow to create a situation and a space where people could show up and be real. Where there was no need to hide how you are or how you feel or what has harmed you or enlightened you or thrilled you,
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't socially acceptable. I just really felt the need to create space
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to learn how to hold space for
Mm-hmm.
other people who are trying to remember and learn for the first time that they're absolutely perfect just the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have work to do, as
Mm-hmm.
Suzuki Roshi said.
Right. Wow.
So I'm going to stop now because that was a
Sure.
long
No,
answer.
that's okay. I'm gonna, because I want, there's some pieces I want to know about. So
Of course.
it sounds to me like your life story was similar to many of us, especially those of us in this age bracket, in that we were trained by patriarchy, we were trained by the masculine, we were trained in a masculine system. And so we never really got to, when you said you're learning how to be, which that's the feminine, and that we weren't trained in that at all. And so that to me, and it sounds like to you too, has left scars. And you talk about the trauma of being trained in a toxic masculine paradigm. What was the cost to you on all levels, emotional, physical, all of that? What was, can you speak into that for women? Because what I really want women to hear is that this is dangerous. It's dangerous to us as a species for women to just be so focused that we can't feel our bodies and can't know that we're ill or that we have, that there's problems. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, I want to just add a tiny little thing to that before I do. And that is that not only have we personally been trained to not be present to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
we have also inherited the DNA of our ancestors who were similarly
Mm-hmm.
not allowed to be themselves. I mean, this
Right.
goes back hundreds of years.
Right.
You know, you were not allowed
Mm-mm.
to be.
Mm-hmm.
We don't count. You know, we're possessions.
Mm-hmm.
We have a role to bring children into the world, but we're not allowed to, speak into how things are run or the governance of the place or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we have ancestral trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We have personal trauma. All of my female role models as I was growing up were just the passive, like, I'm not going to say anything because you can't say anything. So, I mean, it's hitting you from absolutely all sides.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to geek out a little bit in the neuroscientific
We
world.
want that. We welcome the geekiness. Bring it.
Yeah, because I think like it has helped me understand that's sort of my strength.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the source of my imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just helped me navigate this. So the way that I look at this from the most scientific perspective is that we're actually all masculine and feminine, male and female, born with all of those qualities.
Mm-hmm.
We're born with two sides of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
The left side, which most of us know best, it's the part that has no room whatsoever for paradox.
Mm-hmm.
It's black and white, it's right and wrong, it's yes and no, it's my way or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the right brain, which is the emotional brain, which is the feminine side, which is the one who can hold all kinds of paradox and wonders, has childlike wonder and awe and emotion. That's the part that is really dismissed in our current world, and particularly the American society right now. And yet, from the physiologic perspective, if we're only living in the left brain, what it lends itself to is living in a state of chronic fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe, at least in my case, and perhaps for some of your viewing audience, the freeze.
Mm-hmm.
The frozen state is not really spoken so much about, but all I'll say about that is it is extremely energetically expensive to live that way.
Mm-hmm.
So while it looks fine to put on the nice clothes and walk into corporate America and be the CEO, if I'm doing it in a masculine way from the masculine paradigm, it is actually taking a great toll on me, regardless of what my accolades might be.
Mm-hmm.
So when we live like that with the left brain, with everything being an emergency, everything has to be done yesterday, what we're doing is we're robbing ourselves of resources that we need to heal, all things large and small.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that takes a hit is the cardiovascular system, but there's absolutely a huge hit to the gastrointestinal system. And most importantly, I think for our audience here, the hormones.
Mm-hmm.
You see, because the adrenal glands are one of the ways that we produce cortisol, but in the heat of an emergency, all of the available sex hormones are converted to cortisol because survival is more important. It's my opinion. I don't have data. It's my opinion that that's the reason that we have so many perimenopausal symptoms.
Absolutely.
In this day and age, because we're completely depleted.
Mm-hmm.
And the final thing that takes a hit physiologically is your immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at what do women who overdo get? Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, all kinds of undiagnosable and unfigure-outable things that, again, they're dismissed because somebody says they're just being emotional. It's all in their head.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in their head. It's in their body. And not only is the physiology of that in their body, trauma of all kinds, large and small, lives in your body, not in your head. So in this time of the Me Too movement, it's not that people aren't telling what's going on. It's that they don't have a cognitive awareness of what's going on because the traumatic memory lives in the body. And this disconnect is just, I think, causing an irreparable harm as people are trying to make sense of, what happens to them when they're traumatized, again, in ways large and small. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not sure if I got too far off track of your question.
No, that's exactly what I wanted people to hear. It's like, that's the real, that's what's really happening in your female body. But if you're not symptomatic, if you don't have all those things going on, or if you're covering it up with coffee and whatnot, it's like you can't feel it. If you're not still, you, just like you said, you didn't feel all those things in your body really until you stopped and until you slowed down. So that kind of segues right into the next question. How did you find mindfulness, and why was it not enough?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that's the next question, because that's where I was going to go. So I agree with you that we have to be still enough to feel how we actually are. Mm-hmm. However, I want to add another piece to that, and that is, if we've been traumatized, we do not have cognitive awareness of what's going on. Yeah. And therefore, being still enough to feel how you feel is actually threatening. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's unsafe to be present in your body, particularly with sexual trauma, but it's not the only thing.
Mhm.
It's not safe to be in my body. So you give me a practice that everybody says on the news is going to change my life. And when I sit down with me, my body, my physiology freaks out because it doesn't feel safe.
Right.
So for that reason, the mindfulness was not enough for me. Now, I certainly, thankfully, did not have that kind of trauma, but
Mhm.
my trauma, large and small, added up.
Mhm.
And so when I sat down, what became clear to me, first from the cognitive perspective, was that my nervous system would not settle. No matter what my intention was, my nervous system could not settle down. And so I'm like, okay, maybe we're looking at this backwards, because we're being taught that if we sit down and get quiet, our nervous system will settle.
Mhm.
But my personal experience is that that's not true.
Right.
So how can I get my nervous system to settle first so that then it's safe enough for me to sit down and see how I actually am?
Mhm.
And that question led me to through a lot of exploration and study and research into the role of trauma. I mean, that was really what made me understand
Mhm.
the depth of my own trauma, because I would have just really dismissed most of what had happened to me in my life as, that's just what happens to people.
Right.
But the reality for me is that it impacted me in very, very deep and powerful ways. And so it doesn't matter what anybody else's experience might have been.
Mhm.
It changed me.
Mhm.
So how can I settle my nervous system down enough so that I can be present to me?
Mhm.
And I've been on a search for years for this.
Mhm.
And the thing that I accidentally fell into, well, it's not true. 20 years ago, I bought Donna Eden's book.
Mhm.
And she's got a great book, Energy Medicine for Women.
Yeah.
I bought this book, and there was stuff in that book that talked to me about the very physical things that I was experiencing.
Mhm.
Just for a couple of examples, I always felt like the two sides of my body literally were not connected.
Mhm.
I had that felt sense. When I had acupuncture, I would say it to the acupuncturist, and they would argue with me for a while, and then they would do a test and go, oh, you're right. So there was this split literally in my felt sense, which
Right.
was really important. And I extrapolate that to the left-right brain thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there was this notion that we have, once we get stuck in this energetic pattern, it's going to take time and energy to shift out of it.
Mhm.
So I underlined stuff in red and started, and I had it all. I'm like, thank God somebody finally understands me.
Mhm.
And I put the book down for 20 years. So, 5 years ago, I picked up the book again because I'm like, okay, I got to have help. Because I'll say that one of my chronic, recurring, and ongoing issues is chronic headaches.
Right.
And I'm convinced that it's a traumatic trigger
Mhm.
that I've still not cognitively quite figured out.
Right.
But in the search for relief from that, I looked again into Eden Energy Medicine. I started doing these crazy little things that Donna Eden, who was a very happy person, which annoyed me in the first place, because I'm like in stress. So she's doing all these crazy things. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And then I'm like, well, maybe, wait, what else you're really at a dead end.
Mhm.
I started doing this little daily energy routine, and I started feeling different. I started feeling more present in my body. I started realizing when I did deeper study that I have the power in my hands to do some silly little things
Mhm.
to settle my nervous system down in the heat of the moment. And
Mhm.
that has been life altering. And it was so, so powerful for me in the beginning that I've done a couple of years of training now. And so now I'm seeing clients because I understand how powerful it is
Mhm.
to learn to settle your own nervous system.
Mhm. Beautiful.
So I keep going off
No,
because
that's exactly where I want you to go. You're not going off, you're going right where I want you to be. So could you talk a little when you say, because you talk about trauma,
yeah.
and I know when people hear the word trauma, they immediately think, rape, car accident, blah, but talk about what, the importance of recognizing trauma and what that can be, like even the smaller traumas that people might not recognize as trauma at all, or they
So
might.
do you mind if I tell another little story?
I would love for you to tell a story.
So I came across in this like most recent part of my journey, came across a ceremony that's described by Clarissa Pinkola Estes called the scar ceremony. And at that moment, because I'm totally steeped in the Western, masculine mentality, it's like a group of women that sit around and tell their stories. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go there. However, what would happen if I just sat down with me and started to write down a list of all of the impactful things in my life? Like, I feel like I've been in trauma for so much of my life. I don't have a lot of memory, which is one of the things that happens. Like, I see pictures and I remember the picture, but I don't have a felt sense memory of when that was. So let's just write down like everything that comes to mind when you think of things that have shaped you. And I went all the way back to when I was a little tiny kid, things that I shouldn't remember, and started to write. And I wrote and wrote and wrote, and it turned out to be like 4 pages front and back. And I stopped because I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. But I chose to not judge myself, right? I chose, because my inquiry was, what are the things that have shaped me? Because I don't know what else to do to help myself. I'm gonna have to ask questions that my left brain is not going to be able to talk me out of anymore.
Right.
And so these were not necessarily significant things, but I know that I have a visceral memory of them. And what that led me to, which I think is a critical part of all of this work, is the capacity to be compassionate for myself. Because when I looked at this list, Kath, I was like, oh my God, it is like a miracle that you can even walk and talk. It's a miracle. And so it doesn't have to be, and I think this is a big disservice that we do culturally, we do in our families, that's not a big deal. Oh, stop crying. That didn't hurt. It did hurt. One of the things I learned in mindfulness training was that denying the experience that you're having is a form of violence to yourself. And so that's where I went with this. Like, it doesn't matter if the whole universe would have said this doesn't matter, because this mattered to me. And when I started to look at it that way, I, number one, found an incapacity to understand why I had not been kind to myself before. I felt a huge tenderness, not just to me, but for everybody out there, because I started to realize it was clear to me that all of the behavior that I complained about was clearly coming from a place of woundedness. And so it's our responsibility to acknowledge our own woundedness without putting it on a scale. It doesn't matter whose is bigger or better or worse or whatever. It's mine. These things weigh me down. And if I can start to look at them non-judgmentally, then I can look out there and go, oh my gosh, instead of, striking back at that person, I can go, oh my gosh, wonder what happened to them. And it opens the door to, I think, all of the things that we're speaking to here, this feminine paradigm. It allows us to hold ourselves in that way, by holding ourselves in that way, to be able to hold the rest of the world just like that. But it allows you to do so not from a place of exhaustion, but from a place of wholeness and fullness.
Wow.
Because I'm doing my own work. And because I'm doing my own work, I'm filling myself up with love, because bless my heart, this is hard. And then I can give you some. If I don't do that work, I can still give you some, but I'm going to just shrink.
Exactly. Wow. So what would you say, because I bet some of your clients are this typical woman I'm going to describe, that, she's got the family, she's got the job, she has all the things that she's trying to work to balance. And she knows she's exhausted. She knows that she's doing herself a disservice, but she doesn't see any way out. It's like, all these people are dependent on me. What do I do? What would you say to someone that came to you and said that?
Well, I mean, I think we attract the people that we understand and need. And that's pretty much the kind of person I see all the time.
Right. I know.
The way that I take it is actually in a sort of a different way. Like I listen. First of all, I listen.
Mhm.
First of all, I listen because what I have learned in the short time I've been doing this piece of my
Mhm.
work
Mhm.
is that most people really just need for their story to be heard.
Mhm.
So I let them talk however long they want to talk.
Mhm.
And a quick digression, when I was in medical school, one of the most valuable things I learned from an old grizzled professor
Mhm.
was if you keep your mouth shut long enough, young lady, the patient's going to tell you what they have. And it was really important to me. And that's what I do now. I don't know how well I did it in my surgery practice, but now that's what I do. And I listen. And as I listen to this story, I hear things.
Mhm.
And inevitably, what I hear is this story of unrecognized trauma.
Mhm.
And then I gently say, well, is there anything else? Is there anything, this person bothers me, and why is that? Is there somebody in your family? Does this remind you of something?
Mhm.
Inevitably, we get to a place of trauma.
Mhm.
And I think that the beginning of the healing is to know that that's in there. Because as I said before, it's like a splinter. It's just in there festering.
Mhm. Mhm.
And once it's witnessed, once it's brought out into the light of day, it has
Mhm.
different power.
Right.
And then to speak to it energetically, I think is important, because
Mhm.
otherwise there's a capacity to really be judgmental about why you can't handle this and why you can't get over this and why this doesn't bother everybody else as much as it does you.
Mhm.
So I speak to the energy of it. Like when all of your energy is going to keep the lid on this pot,
Mhm.
there's none left for you.
Right.
And so just to know that and to realize that you have more power than you know
Mhm.
to shift your energy is really where we begin.
Right.
And I think that sometimes without, even before I do my energy balancing work with these folks,
Mhm. Mhm.
what has happened is that normally there are tears
Mhm.
because it's like often it's completely a surprise.
Mhm.
It's actually almost always a surprise that
Mhm.
there was something underneath this anxiety,
Mhm.
underneath this need to compete, this need to perform, this need to be the best,
Mhm.
and I make space for all of that, and the energy in the room changes before we do anything.
Right. For sure. Wow.
And then going forward, it's really I just encourage people to take gentle care of themselves and their hearts,
Mhm.
to really realize that what we're doing here is a big deal. Like we're asking the impossible of this physical container,
Mhm.
which has limitations.
Right.
And then to go back to what I explained about the adrenal glands and the
Mhm.
nervous system when we're stressed out, just like it is, if I want to continue, if that is my path, if I want to continue to serve the world in that way, it's going to be essential for me to figure out a way to fill my energetic body back up. And coffee and drugs and Xanax and alcohol is not going to do it.
Right.
Right. So it's a matter of retraining your energy body
Mhm.
by just doing simple things. Like, for example, in extreme anxiety,
Mhm.
just making an okay sign and
Mhm.
putting your thumbs and your temples and your fingers on your forehead and taking a couple of breaths
Wow.
starts to settle the nervous system.
Beautiful.
Putting your hands on your neck calms the vagus nerve, which is responsible for the fight or flight or freeze response.
Mhm.
So just those tiny little things
Mhm.
that remind you that you have the power. And for me, at least, I had the opportunity to wield my power as a woman surgeon in a man's world and win all of the awards and blah, blah, blah. But the power to notice that I am freaking out, to stop, to do something to help myself
Mhm.
so that I can see clearly and then I can respond rather than react to the situation.
Mhm.
That for me is power beyond measure.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the kind of power that I want to have. And it's the power that I want to share with the people that come to me and ask for my guidance.
Right.
Because it's not going to be big, flashy, cover of the Rolling Stone stuff.
Right.
It's going to be stuff that's going to make your life feel more easy.
Mhm.
That's going to make you more available to the people that you want to serve.
Mhm.
that's going to make you feel like you have enough, and to be crystal clear when you need a timeout because you don't have enough.
Right.
Because it's for everybody.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So I want to make sure that we speak into this today. You mentioned the importance that you feel a passion about telling your story, and that what kept you in the past from telling your story and telling the truth about how you were was shame. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Um, it goes back, or at least I'm sure it goes back farther than this, as everything does. But the place that I remember was shortly after I had this malpractice suit that just wrecked my life.
Mm-hmm.
Colleagues that had professed their love and support for me forever, like I would watch them literally say the right words, but literally pull physically back from me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was more hurtful than anything they could have said.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of got stuck in my nervous system, that I don't want to do or say anything that's going to make people do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of frustration and shame that I couldn't just get over this the way my colleagues were saying. A lot of my colleagues said, "Why are you so upset? This is not personal. Like, just get over it."
Mm-hmm.
No, it's very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks to the brokenness of the system, but we won't go there.
Right.
It is a big deal. And if we brush it under the carpet, it's going to grow and fester like it is. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
Right.
So my biggest shame going forward with my more holistic work was that, as I mentioned, I'm teaching these amazing things, and I'm watching my students in my classes tell me that their lives are changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how come it's not actually working for me?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what led to the exploration of the energy piece. But I didn't say it in my classes. And what I started to feel in the classes was that I was being disingenuous. Like I felt like I was withholding something, and yet I didn't know what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I just really decided that I was going to tell the truth. Like, I was going to tell the truth that one day I was trying to teach a class and I had a terrible headache.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said out loud, "You know what? I think that what I'm saying to you is not as clear as I would like it to be, because I have a really bad headache. I have headaches. I didn't want to cancel class. I apologize for this. And next week in class, we'll go all over this whole thing, and I'll make sure that it's clear. And if I've made it muddled because of my state of mind."
Mm-hmm.
And everything changed. Everything changed. I'm not sure I can put my finger on exactly how,
Mm-hmm.
but what it felt like and what I tell myself is that when I decided to show up as real,
Mm-hmm.
the authenticity of my work, even though I was saying the same words, shifted dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
The people that were drawn to me and asking me for my opinion increased, because they were coming to me because I had shown them
Mm-hmm.
that I was a real person just like them.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to really feel like it was my responsibility to tell my story. I said for years I wasn't going to talk about the malpractice story anymore. It was over, it was done, it was gone. But it marked me. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here doing this.
Right.
So yes, I hated it, and it saved my life at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So it just felt like my responsibility to tell the truth. And in the telling of the story that I had kept away from the world, I could feel myself start to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say responsibility, I'm reminded I had the great good fortune to interview Jill Bolte Taylor for a summit a little while ago. And she talks about the word responsibility as response-ability.
Mm-hmm.
So not this heavy-handed responsibility like you have to do this, it's your job, but you have the capacity to respond to your life difficulty in a way that can be of benefit to others. Yeah. And so what I started to learn is that the thing that I thought I had to hide because it minimized me in some way as a teacher or a healer or whatever I am, was the very thing that people were waiting to hear. It was the very thing that they wanted to see so that they could trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just like a, a V8 moment, because I was like, wait a minute, me, I know that I don't want to go see any kind of healer
Mm-hmm.
if they seem like they're up here somewhere and they've never had a life experience like I have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I made the decision, I need to work with other healers for my own journey that have had trauma, that have been wounded, that understand in their bone marrow what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started to just make more sense to tell the story. So, again, in the beginning, I thought I had to wait till I was done. I had to wait till I figured it all out. And it was all wrapped up with a beautiful bow on top. And then I could say, oh, let me tell you how I got here.
Mm-hmm.
No, that is completely false. And the telling of the story has benefited not just me, but many, many other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could invite anybody to do anything, it would be to find the courage to tell your story, and before you do so, to make sure you're doing your own healing work, because this is not just about complaining or oversharing or anything like that. This is about allowing the external circumstances of your life to dictate your inner work, and your inner work to change the way that you relate to the external circumstances of your life. It becomes a symbiotic relationship when you're willing to share yourself and to admit, like, I can't really go there because this is still a wound for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak to you clearly about this because I get triggered around that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that kind of clarity, that for me is the place of the feminine. That's the fierce, like, no, that's enough, because that's going to put me in a place where I'm not going to be able to see you anymore.
Wow. That's so powerful. So I know what your free gift is. So I want you to speak into the yoga nidra piece and how that benefited you and how you see that as a restorative practice for people, because I know you're going to give that as a gift this time.
Yes, thank you for that. So the yoga nidra became a really hard practice for me when I was doing my yoga teacher training, because in the first weekend, we did this practice called yoga nidra, when you lie on the floor and don't do anything for 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time in my memory that I relaxed. I thought I had relaxed before. I had never viscerally relaxed my body. And true relaxation in the yogic tradition is complete absence of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual tension.
Mm-hmm.
Who goes there? Nobody goes there.
Yeah.
Right? So not only that, if I want to integrate the right and the left hemispheres of my brain, I have to settle down my nervous system. And the best way to do that is to sort of trick it into settling.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very systematically guided practice of releasing all of the energetic blocks in the physical body, which is the place, right, where trauma is stored.
Mm-hmm.
It opens all of the energy channels. It allows energy to flow freely. There's a piece of guided imagery in there, which really is meant to stir up your subconscious mind. So if there is something that's taken an inordinate amount of your energy under your conscious awareness, when you're in this relaxed state, it might just go away. So it is like psychotherapy without talking.
Mm-hmm.
It's pulling out the deepest, most energetically draining parts of your story.
Mm-hmm.
And it restores you to a place of integration and balance, which allows you to move into the world in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
It has the physiologic effect of 2 to 8 hours of restful sleep. And I dare say that, at least in my hands, I do a lot of really wonderful things.
Mm-hmm.
But the place where healing actually happens is from this place of completely relaxed, open-hearted awareness. And I don't know how to get there, really, except from something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So you're training your energy body to go to this place where absolutely nothing rocks your boat.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the place where your healing is going to start.
Mm-hmm.
And in a perfect world, we would be doing that kind of work in our dream time at night in sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But who does that? Nobody does that, because nobody rests.
Mm-hmm.
The latest statistics horrifyingly say that 86% of Americans are sleep deprived.
Right. That
So when you're sleep deprived, that's adding another insult to injury. You're further, depleting your energetic resources. It's
Mhm,
why we get sick. It's why we are all susceptible to all the viruses that are going around. We
mhm,
don't have any immune cushion at
right,
all.
right.
So it has so many different levels of healing.
Mhm,
Um, it can be used for sleep, which is where I start.
mhm,
It also, though, on the other extreme, has the capacity to lead to enlightenment.
mhm,
My personal opinion that if you're not relaxed and rested, you're not going to get there.
mhm,
So we're going to start where we are, which is exhausted, and we're going to work with exhausted. And this same practice can then cause your journey to move along wherever it needs to go.
wow.
So we're really training the nervous system to a new way of
Mhm,
being. Both sides of the brain open, access to the 100 billion neurons and all of their connections, opening to infinite possibility from a place of integration and balance, which allows then you to show up in the world with kindness and compassion.
mhm.
I don't know. It sounds like the cat's meow to me. I'm really
To me
hoping
too.
that everybody's going to try it because it just, I think you'll be shocked. I mean,
Right.
people who say, no, I relax are just completely speechless after
Mhm.
practicing.
Perfect. I'm excited. I'm excited to try it.
I hope you
Um,
will.
um, so if I'm assuming, I know you have a private practice there where you live. Do you work with people online and on the
I
phone?
do. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes.
if anybody wants, after seeing this, it is my hope and opinion that several people will sign up to just come and see you or
Okay.
to
Awesome.
work with you. So they can go to your website and find out all that information.
Yeah. So I would just advise, I sort of like to talk to people. I don't just have a sign up for
Mhm,
such things.
mhm, mhm.
So if anybody is interested, please send me an email, just gina@ginasager.com, or you can contact me through my website, which is ginasager.com.
Perfect.
And yeah, I've got some other yoga nidras on my website too, if you
Mhm.
really love that practice.
Sure. That's
And
awesome.
I'm happy to talk to anybody that's interested in my work.
Sweet. Gina, thank you so much. This is exactly the piece that was missing in our lineup. So I'm very, very happy that you joined us today. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to send out to women that are listening?
So for some reason, a favorite poem of mine is coming to mind,
Mhm,
um, called Kindness, and
mhm,
just a line out of the word kindness to invite you to really drop into your own trauma and pain and stuff,
mhm.
says that before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up to sorrow and speak to it until your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and then you can see the size of the cloth.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
then it's only kindness that matters. And that's really where I think we need to go with this.
Mhm,
There are plenty of things that we can do, but what the world needs right now, what each one of us needs right now,
mhm.
is to learn to be kind.
Absolutely.
And it starts here, to learn to be kind to yourself, to embrace your life history, to embrace the body in which you live. It is a rare and precious gift to have this time in a human body,
Mhm. It
and
is.
to just be here now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, if we were in person, I'd give you a big hug, but we're
I'll
not.
give you a
So,
virtual hug.
so appreciate you and the work that you're doing and your bravery and your courage for speaking out about it. Thank you so much.
Honor and pleasure. And I just truly hope that anything that I've said will serve the people that need it.
I know
Thank
it
you.
will.
Pleasure.
I hope.